All right. On this episode, we got one of the greatest bankruptcy trustees, licensed bankruptcy trustees in Canada, Doug Hoyes. Thanks for coming on. You have had a storied career, 20 years plus in this business, former CA with KPMG. Now they're CPAs.
Yeah, they changed the name. I don't know why, but I'm still legally a CA and a CPA, but you're right.
You've been doing this a long time.
Yes.
From last I heard, you've looked at over 70,000 cases where you've done budgets for people, met with over 100,000 people in your career.
This is all true.
Where are we going in this current environment with debt?
Depends who you are. So everyone always asks, how's the economy doing? Well, there's not one economy. There's, I guess, an infinite number of them. But if you are somebody who bought a house 20 years ago and has paid off your mortgage and had some money to save, and you put it in the stock market and made some money there, everything's great. It's all wonderful. Like, there's nothing wrong. And then, I don't know if you follow the news or not, but March of 2020, a bunch of stuff happened.
A little bit.
And that was either devastating or the greatest thing ever. So if you were somebody back then who owned their home and you were a knowledge worker, meaning you sat in front of a computer all day long, then you got redeployed to home. It was fantastic. So you didn't have to pay for daycare. You weren't paying for gas for the car. You didn't have to go into the office. Probably haven't bought a suit in 5 years.
Savings rates went through the roof.
Fantastic. Yeah, savings rates like over 25%, and it was practically zero before that happened. And savings rates is something we should talk about because that's the opposite of what people think it means. But so if you were one of those people, fantastic. But if you were a retail worker or anybody who did not own an asset when that happened, you got crushed. And obviously, inflation has since then ratcheted up. So if you were an owner, you benefited. Your house is worth a lot more, your stocks, crypto. I assume you're a big crypto guy, Vince. It's huge. We'll do an hour on that someday. But whatever hard thing you owned went up. But if you were a renter, well, you didn't own anything. So all you saw was all your expenses going up. So the cost of food today, according to Statistics Canada, and I'm sure they're completely accurate in all respects because it's the government, right?
I don't think so.
The 25% higher than it was when the pandemic started. Now, when you read the news, inflation's coming down, it's only 2 or 3 or 4% or whatever. Yeah, but that doesn't mean the costs have come down.
No.
It just means they're not going up as fast. So you got somebody whose house price is worth a lot more than it was, and somebody else who's spending 25% more on groceries. That's the person who, to make ends meet, has had to resort to debt. And that's the person who's getting crushed right now because, of course, interest rates are higher than they were 2 years ago. And more of their paycheck is going to those daily living expenses and now debt, and they're the ones getting crushed. So where are we going? Well, for those people, it's not good because I do not see any easy way out. I don't think things are going to turn around anytime soon.
How bad is it? Are we seeing a trend, hockey sticking, with insolvencies right now? Are we not there yet?
Not there yet.
Okay.
But it's because there's always a time lag, right? So you eat a bag of cookies and you feel great. If you eat a bag of cookies every day for 2 or 3 years, you're going to get sick. When does that happen? Is it one bag of cookies? Is it a week? Is it a month? I don't know. It's different for everybody. But certainly more and more people are reaching the breaking point. But if this is a ball game, I don't know, we're in the second or third inning.
We're still early.
We're still early.
Well, you came out with an article not too long ago talking about the housing insolvency index? Household insolvency index, I think it is.
Yeah. So
people who owned homes and have filed for insolvency.
Yes.
And
yes.
when values were going up, it was almost non-existent.
Yeah. So we call it the Hoyes-Michaelis Homeowners Bankruptcy Index. Because you see marketing there, got the Hoyes.
Love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
Right? Yeah. So, and what it shows is the percentage of our clients who owned a home when they filed an insolvency. Okay, so in Canada, there's two kinds of insolvency, a proposal or bankruptcy. And a proposal, you keep your stuff, Bankruptcy, well, you probably didn't have any stuff to begin with. So if you go back to February of 2011, about a third of our clients owned a home when they filed their insolvency. And you're thinking, well, how can that be? Well, because back then their home was $200,000 and the mortgage was 180, so there wasn't much equity in it anyways. So maybe we did a consumer proposal. They offered their creditors 10 or 20 grand. They accepted, everything was good. Well, you go to 2022 when every house is $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
And if you bought it more than a year ago, it's gone up. And so even if you mortgaged yourself to the hilt, you still got 100 grand in equity. And if you got $50,000 in credit card debt, well, you don't need to go bankrupt. You refinance, right. You sell, whatever. So I believe it was August of 2022, 0% of my clients.
It was nominal, nothing.
Yeah. And even today into 2024, we're in the sort of 5-6% range. So we're nowhere near where we were back 10 or 15 years ago. And I assume what is going to happen is, I can't predict the real estate market, so I have no idea. But are house prices going to keep going up at 20% forever?
No, they're not. But we're definitely seeing credit tightening on the mortgage side with all the new qualifying rules. And we're starting to see folks not having the capacity to access equity, especially with lines of credits being, they're hemorrhaging people. They've cut that back down to, 66% to 2/3. So I think the number was 6.8. It went up to in your latest number, which is significant and trending upwards, right?
Yep.
I'm worried that those folks are going to be doing a lot more proposals because they're trying to access credit to keep their payments up on their mortgages.
Yep.
Are you seeing?
I totally agree. And when someone comes in to see me, whether they're a renter or a homeowner, they're almost always up to date on their rent or their mortgage payment. That's the last thing you miss. You get behind, your taxes, well, I couldn't pay those last year, so I'm way behind on those. But okay, my credit card, maybe I'm a month or two behind on, my line of credit, whatever. But rent or mortgage, they're almost always up to date on because it comes automatically out of your bank account, first of the month, every payday, whatever, kind of hard to get behind. But you're right, we are now seeing people who are, refinancing or about to be refinanced. And this is why I say we're in the early innings. And again, you know this better than I am, but the number of mortgages that have to be renewed is going to be bigger in 2025 than it was in 2024, and even bigger in 2026.
Especially the cohort of fixed variable payments, which is going to cause a lot of trouble. If OSFI and these banks get these people to get back on their original amortization schedule, like some of them are on these Buzz Lightyear mortgages, right? Forever. Infinity and beyond.
Yeah.
How's that going to factor into their ability to pay anything else off?
They can't. It's impossible. Yeah, if your mortgage payment goes from $4,000 a month to $8,000 a month, did your paycheck go up by $4,000 after tax?
No.
I can't do the math in my head, but that's a really big number. So the answer is no. So the people who are calling us now are, in some cases, the proactive ones. It's like, well, my mortgage is going to be up for renewal in the summer. I know I can't do it. What do you suggest? And
so at least they're being proactive.
Yes. And for those people, I say, well, you probably should sell your house. Can you sell your house and get out even? Or maybe even have a few bucks? Well, I don't want to sell my house because that's the only thing I own. Well, but if the house is worth $1 million and the mortgage is $900,000, and after selling costs and everything, you really don't own a lot, but you got to compare apples to oranges, A to B. Like, what if you sell the house, you don't have a place to live, but you've got money and you've got an income so you can rent, it's not the end of the world. But that's a very hard decision for people to make.
And what's driving it? I always hear, well, I really don't want to take the kids out of their environment. I don't want to take them out of their school. I always tell them you could rent the house in the same district.
Yep.
You don't necessarily have to move out.
Yep. And that's why my advice is find a place to rent and then make the decision. So I remember a client a few years ago in exactly that situation. And I said exactly that to them. You need to find a place to rent. You can't afford this. They ended up finding a place to rent on their same street. Same street. So kids didn't have to move school district. Now, okay, they maybe got lucky, But a school district's a pretty big area. It doesn't have to be on your street. And if your kids are really young, does your 5-year-old really need to stay in the same school? Does it matter? I get it. If your kids are in high school, it's a much bigger thing. But again, do the numbers. So how much does it actually cost you to own that house? It's not just the mortgage payment. That's the number everyone thinks about. But go back over the last few years. How much have you spent on all the repairs and maintenance? And if your washing machine goes, the next day the dryer goes because they talk to each other, right? They're sentient beings and they all go at the same time. And so repairs and maintenance can easily be $1,000 or $2 a month. Not every month.
Everything's $1,000 bill.
That's
these
right.
days.
That's right.
Nothing costs hundreds anymore.
And so you're not just paying $4,000 a month on your mortgage, which is going up to $8,000. You're probably already paying $6,000 or $7,000 a month, which is going up to $10,000. So can you find a place to rent for less than $10,000 a month? Well, of course you can.
Absolutely.
And so that is often the right answer. But yes, to answer your question, I don't want to have to move. I've got a dog and a cat and a pets and I can't find a place and I got a car and I got this and I got that. Okay, I understand all that. But look at the numbers and try to make an informed decision about what this is going to be. Do you want to spend every dollar you've got on your house payments for the next 2, 3, 5 years?
You're a slave to debt.
That's it. You know?
Now, you've been doing this a long time. I've been in this space quite a long time as well, longer than amortization schedule. We talked a bit about that earlier. What has the profile change been between people you dealt with when you first started to today? Like I remember doing a lot of refinances, working at the banks, and people just had a closet full of shoes and clothes and they ate out a lot. Mm-hmm. What's today's profile consist of?
Yeah, everybody has more stuff because that's the way it is. So, I mean, I've got this really fancy phone that can give me directions to wherever I need to go and all sorts of cool things that 30 years ago, that wasn't a thing. You know, we all have a decent TV, we all drive a decent car, that sort of thing. So certainly we are consuming more than perhaps we were able to consume 20 or 30 years ago. You couldn't buy a fancy phone or a big screen TV then. It wasn't a thing. What we're seeing, in fact, we don't even have to go back 30 years. Let's go back a year. My client today earns more than my client earned even a year ago, 8 or 9% more.
That's a lot.
And you're like, well, that's a lot. They must be doing pretty good. No, it's because even at a higher income level, you get into debt now. And so what we've done is we've moved everybody up the curve. I can't prove it, but I suspect that my clients today have a higher credit score than what they had a year or 2 or 5 ago.
That's interesting.
But they're maxed out, right? Like, how do you get a high?
Now, do you think they're maxed out because they're trying to feed that beast being the mortgage? And rates are renewing, and you got to find extra $2,500.
Yep. Yeah. And again, very few of my clients are homeowners. So we haven't got to those people yet. Those are the ones we're going to be talking about next year and the year after. It's people who are just crushed by the cost of living. And
rent being one of them.
Yes. And everything, like everything is more expensive. So for the viewer, I'm not supposed to look at the camera, but I know you're in there. Take a look at the numbers. How much were you making 2, 3, 4 years ago? And how much were you spending on groceries? How much was a liter of gas? How much was everything? And for a lot of people, their income has gone up at a slower pace than expenses. Okay, well, how are you funding that shortfall? Are you cutting back? Are you just only eating every other day? Is that your plan? No, you're probably spending more and you're probably using debt to bridge that gap, which when interest rates were 0 was fine. No problem. The federal government did it. Everybody did it. But now that interest rates are higher, we've got more debt, which isn't the problem. It's the carrying cost of debt that's the killer.
Yeah.
And that's what's whacking people.
Well, you talked about cost of living and inflation. I want to talk a little bit about that for a minute. I'm a big numbers guy. I really like drilling down on the 8 components that make up the CPI basket. The top 3 being shelter, transportation, and food. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk a little bit about transportation for a minute, because the percentage weighting of that component has ranged from 15.96 to almost 20% within a 4 or 5 year window. Now, someone would say, well, Vince, listen, back in 2020, there's a lot of people at home. They weren't driving, so they got to adjust the weighting. Makes sense. But why would the weighting be 20% in 2021 and only 16 now? It should be the opposite. So when we're talking about inflation figures from month to month going up and down 0.1, sentiment is a big driver in how people behave. And I think these numbers are manipulated to the point where they're trying to create a narrative that really isn't there, because you and I know the cost of living is a lot more than that inflation rate. And yeah, you could talk about shelter and housing and interest rates, but everything else is going up. And I think you see it every day.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And that's why I encourage everyone to do their own numbers.
Everybody has a different basket.
That's right. So, like, how much does a pound of bacon cost compared to 2 years ago? And the answer is, it's pretty close to double.
Yep.
So even though food inflation is 23% over the last 3.5 years, that pound of bacon is double. So if you're somebody who likes to eat bacon, and I'm not encouraging people to eat bacon here, let me be very clear about that.
I know Ron does.
Absolutely. As do I, actually. So if that's something you spend your money on, then yeah, absolutely, it's gotten worse. In transportation, you're absolutely right. There are people who've said, you know what, I can't have a car because I simply can't afford it. And if you live in Toronto, you can't afford to park it, let alone drive it. So we've got more and more people who are giving up their cars just because they can't afford it. So what is happening with your own personal inflation? Well, for a lot of people, it's a lot higher. And I totally agree with you on sentiment. It's not what's happening today that matters. It's what do I think is going to happen tomorrow?
Yeah.
And so if I think things are going to get worse, so you mentioned the savings rate went way up during the pandemic, 25%. And the savings rate is the difference between the ins and the outs. That's what the difference is, what we save. It's not, they don't count up how much is in your bank account. It's the difference between the ins and the outs. So why did the savings rate go way up? Well, it's because we didn't have any money to spend it on, couldn't go outside, couldn't go on a vacation. Yeah, okay, that's all true. But it's also because I was really worried about the future, because the world was going to end, it was going to be horrible, and so we better tuck something away. Well, now the savings rate has come back down, not to where it was 5 years ago, but it eventually will hit that number, I'm pretty sure. The US is way ahead of us on that metric. So I think the reason the savings rate has come down is I need the money to pay for my living costs and so on. So, and at the same time, credit card debt, way up.
On the credit card debt, and going back to the original question about what you saw when you started and what you see today and what people are spending money on, one of the things that is the most impactful, I believe, is the minimum payment that's due on a credit card. When I started lending back in my days at TD and Canada Trust back in the late 80s, early 90s, we always had to use a 5% repayment on credit card balances. Now, in some cases, it's 2%.
Yep.
Some are 1%.
Yep.
And there's really this perpetual debt that continues to accumulate. And at 20% interest rates, it only goes up. It can't come down.
It's massive. Yeah, it's absolutely massive.
How much is financial literacy? How much does that play into this? And are the new immigrants that are coming here that don't rely on credit and don't understand how they work getting abused by the system?
Well, there's 2 points of view on that. So one point of view is, financial literacy, we don't teach it in schools. The young kids today, they don't understand any of that stuff. And okay, I guess that's true. Can someone tell me what an amortization table is? Can someone tell me the difference between term and amortization? It's not that hard a question, but Can the average person tell you that? I don't know. So yeah, sure, there's something to that. But the other side of it is, if your paycheck is $2,500 a month and rent is $2,000, and you're the most financially literate person in the world, what can you do? Nothing.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the bigger problem, that there just isn't enough money there for a certain segment of society. Again, the people who are doing well are doing great. If you make $200,000 a year, you spend this percentage of your income on food. I don't know what the percentage is. I'm going to make it up.
It's a lot smaller than it's
5% or whatever. Yeah. But if you make $2,000 a month, well, you might be spending 20 or 30 or 40% of your income on food. So the changes in that food inflation makes a huge difference to the person at the lower end of the economic spectrum. Is that financial literacy? No, it's I can't find a job making enough money to make ends meet. And again, you and I are, I guess, of the same vintage. We think back and we go, well, in my day, I got a job and I worked. Okay, wait a minute. I went to school at the University of Toronto in the 1980s. Okay, I graduated in 1987. My tuition was $1,000 a year. I was able to get a summer job at minimum wage and I could earn $1,000. I could actually pay for my own tuition. I had a part-time job while I was in school, was able to cover my books and whatnot.
Canada Trust while going to university.
There you go. And now my parents helped out with living expenses. I graduated, no student loan debt. And I can't remember any of my buddies having student loan debt either because it just wasn't a thing. Well, now that same education to become an accountant, which is like the cheapest kind of degree you can get, there's no labs or anything like that.
Sure.
It's like $6,000 or $8,000 a year. And if you want to get a real degree like nursing or engineering or something like that, you're talking $16,000 a year. So, okay, kid, we want you to go to school. We didn't save any money for you. Where are you going to get a job making $16,000 in the summer? You can't do it.
Yeah.
So you start your life, assuming everything goes well and you graduate, in the hole. You're in debt. So you and I didn't have that. We started out flat. And we were able, okay, I'll have to, rent a small apartment, get a roommate, whatever. But we weren't spending the first 10 years of our working life paying off debt.
But in addition to that, Doug, we didn't have cell phones.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have internet to pay for. We didn't have all these apps that we subscribed to. Like we had a little brother typewriter.
Yep.
Probably.
Yep.
Right, with the little strip.
Yep.
That corrected a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody called you, left a message with your parents.
Yep. No, it's true. There's more that we can spend money on today than in the past. Now, I guess we can have the debate about whether a cell phone is a necessity or a luxury or not. A lot of people don't have a computer, they have a phone.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone is going bankrupt because of their phone.
No.
Even with our high cell phone rates here in Canada, it's still not that imposing a thing. But you're right. We tend to drive, better vehicles, better everything. But it is also true that everything costs more. So if young people today could pay the equivalent amount that I paid and could start their working life off at zero instead of negative 50,000, would things be different?
Well, one would argue, I think I was at $3.75 an hour as a part-time job.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe it was $4.25. $3.75 to $4.25 rings a bell. Now the minimum wage is $16.
Mm-hmm. So
there's a lift there.
Yeah, but the difference between 1,000 and 16,000
is a lot. There's no question, but I still think there's opportunity, and people can start working earlier to make some money.
Mm-hmm.
But inflation does play a role in that, and you are correct. The tuition costs have gotten out of hand.
Yeah, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just, saying the other side of the thing. So, okay, I'm a kid. I'm, 16, 17 years old. I'm in high school. I got to get good grades or else I don't get into the university I want. And so I can't be working at McDonald's part-time because then I don't have time to study and do all the extracurriculars that I got to put on my thing to get into university. And when I get to university, I got to do all the clubs and the this and the that and all the homework, or else I'm not going to get the job. So whereas in my day, I graduated in 87, which was right at the height of the boom. I could work for any accounting firm I wanted to. They didn't care what extracurriculars I did because it didn't matter. Can you work an adding machine? You're in. So it is different today because of those things. But you're also right. We could be a little more
we're almost to the
frugal,
same
too.
vintage. I started in 91 with TD in the mortgage department, and there wasn't a lot of mortgages being done in 91.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I was sent out to meet the bailiff to collect places for TD Bank, which is another story. But it's really interesting because at the end of the day, are young people being given the right bill of goods on the whole education front, because that's a whole other story, right? Everybody, I remember when we were in high school, it was advanced, general, basic. And if you went into the general stream or the basic stream, you're vilified as being an idiot.
Yep.
And I hate to say that.
Yep.
Because everybody wanted you to go into that advanced stream because college and trades were looked down upon. And you go through this 30 years later and we got a shortage of trades. We got a shortage of all these tradespeople. And I don't know if the system really did anybody any justice with that.
I completely agree with you. And if I was advising a young person today, and nobody cares what I think, but if I was, I would say the most important occupation, if you got to choose, would be plumber. Because I guarantee you, even with AI and all the fancy stuff we've got, 500 years from now, we will still be using water.
Yep.
And the second best occupation, I think, would be electrician, because we'll probably still be using electricity. But does anyone tell a kid that? No. How many bankruptcies have I done for plumbers and electricians? Electricians, a couple. Plumbers, I cannot think of ever doing one in my 30-year career. Now, maybe I have.
So do you track trades?
I do.
That's an interesting stat.
We've never pulled the data in detail because everybody calls it something different. And a lot of people work multiple jobs, so the data would get a little mushy. But I know I've got lots of clients who did everything right, went to school, but they ended up with a student loan because, of course, their parents didn't have any money.
And they work at Starbucks.
Right. Or they are underemployed. Let's put it that way. And, not necessarily through their own fault. It's like I was told that this was what I needed to do, and now here I am. Whereas if you would become a plumber, you don't have to go to university for 4 years. You can pretty much start working right away and go through the apprentice program. And yeah, there's some costs and some courses and things like that, but you're working all the way through. So at the end of 4 years out of high school, you're pretty much qualified as a plumber or an electrician, or pretty close to it. And you've got probably pretty close to zero debt.
Yeah.
So yes, I think both parents and educators should be pushing people to where the jobs are as opposed to selling them this bill of goods. And why do they do it the way they do it? Well, because colleges and universities are massive money-making opportunities.
Yeah.
They are huge profit centers. And all you got to do is look at the numbers. Why is $1,000 education now a $16,000 a year education? Are they paying the professors 16 times more? No, I don't think so.
Well, during COVID, I had two in university, and when they went to virtual learning, they didn't give me a discount.
Right. Yep.
Still charged same rates, which just sucked.
Well, we could completely reform the education system, because my son finished university during the COVID period. And I think it was good that he got to go in person for a couple of years and, enjoy the university experience and everything. But he said, it's way easier watching a lecture on Zoom or whatever, because it's recorded. You can fast forward. Oh, I want to hear that part again. I can speed it up, slow it down, whatever. Why not hire the absolute best professors in each discipline, get the best calculus guy there is? He records the videos. Everybody watches them, and we don't need anywhere near the infrastructure we've got. So again, nobody's asked me, and I guess really what you're getting to, Vince, is what's the real problem here? So is the real problem interest rates are too high? Is it government spending? Is it, we're not frugal enough? Like what is the real cause of all this?
It's a good question. I think it's just bad planning. Financial literacy, bad planning, people not knowing what they want to do, people getting pigeonholed into certain streams maybe too early and not knowing what they really want to do. I'm not sure.
I think it's deeper than that. So like when you were 18, did you envision, I'm going to have a podcast someday and it's good? No. So you went and worked at a bank and you no longer work at a bank. I went to work for the big accounting firm. And I did pretty well. I lasted there for 10 years and then said, oh man, I'm not good working for someone else, and started my own thing. And that was 25 years ago, and the rest is history. So I don't think anyone knows what they want to do. I don't know what I want to do. Okay. I haven't figured it out yet either. I think the core of the problem, all the things that are going wrong, can all be traced to one thing. And that is the government can print money. I think it's as simple as that. Because if they couldn't print more money than is needed, could we have all the, like, would university cost as much as it cost if they couldn't? Would we have inflation? Well, we wouldn't have inflation. The definition of inflation, if you believe our old pal Milton Friedman,
is printing money.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it's everywhere and always a monetary phenomenon.
This dovetails into a really interesting topic. You spent 4 days reading the budget?
Yeah, not 24 hours a day, but yes, I actually
went through all 400 pages.
419 pages. I read it. I had the PDF and went through it.
Okay.
And then because it was so confusing, I actually printed it out. I killed a couple of trees, did it on 2-sided paper. And so after I'd read it, I took a pen and I went through and I put a tick mark between every new spending thing.
Okay.
Obviously, there's all the existing spending things, but I counted 219 of them. I'm sure I missed some. And then I took a highlighter and counted every piece of legislation that was referred to. And there was, I think, 54 of them or something. I assumed it would be one. Well, the Income Tax Act, of course. Nope. There's the Bretton Woods Agreement.
I heard that.
Which, what?
Some European Union
the
spending
we
cap.
all remember the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944 in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, when they basically created the system that we have today. I didn't realize in 1985 the Canadian government passed a law that has that in it and has to do with how we can spend money. So I think if they're going to spend my money, I should at least have a clue what they're doing with it. And look, we all know a budget is a marketing document.
Well, they're not listen, you've done 70,000 budgets. That wasn't a budget.
That was not a budget.
Okay. There's no income,
ins and outs
yep. telling us what we are. I think you referenced one page that kind of gives you an idea of what the balance will be.
Right. Yeah. Like they tell me that we're going to spend $40 billion more than we take in. I know that. And this year and next year. No, that is not good. And I get the argument that, but you can't look at it that way. You got to look at it as a percentage of GDP. Because as the economy grows, we can spend more.
But on a per capita basis, we're negative.
Yes. And have been negative for 5 quarters.
Yes.
And the US has been positive for the last 7 or 8 quarters. So we're moving in opposite directions. And that's the problem with printing money. It goes into the system and it's great at the start. So in March, April, May 2020, you don't have to work. Here's $2,000 a month. And that's okay. We can debate whether that was a good idea or not. It doesn't matter. That was 4 years ago. If you're not going to let someone out of their house to work, you got to give them money. You got no choice. It's one or the other. So that's what they did. What they didn't say was, I'm giving you $2,000, but you're going to pay tax on it next year. Not now, but when you file your taxes, you're going to owe taxes on it. So you're not really getting $2,000. Yeah. You're really only getting 18. So I hope you're setting this. They didn't say that. And the system was so screwed up that I have lots of people who applied at CRA, didn't know if they got it or not, went to Service Canada and applied, and ended up getting 2 payments. And so then the next month they said, okay, I obviously shouldn't have got 2 payments. Next month I won't apply. That'll even it out. Nope. You got for 2 months, so therefore you got to pay one of them back. Okay, but I could have got it for the next month and I didn't. Well, yeah, but you didn't. So a whole ton of people ended up not only owing taxes on that money, but having to pay back something that they got that they thought they were entitled to. And frankly, they probably were. My point is, that year, the government spent $360 billion more than they took in. How can they do that? Well, because they have the ability to print money.
So this leads me to an interesting point. And the question I had, how many people are filing for insolvency to get out of paying the CERB? Is there a trend? Because people got caught in not the best of economic environments, having to pay this thing. Are there people being forced into that position?
Yes, but it's the last straw, the straw that broke the camel's back. So even if you were completely committed fraud and collected CERB when you weren't eligible, you got, I don't know what the maximum was, $18,000 or something like that. So if the government says you got to pay back $18,000, that's probably not the only debt you've got, because my average client owes around $50,000 in unsecured debt at the time they file.
How about the
SEBA
loan, the 60 grand?
Ask me in a year. because it hasn't fully hit yet. So yes, I've definitely done some insolvencies for people who had the CEBA loan.
Because the CEBA would probably meet the profile of your client in that $50,000 range.
Yeah, because the maximum CEBA loan was $60,000, I believe. It was 40, and then they upped it to 60. Now, if you got your CEBA loan in a corporation, and the corporation is now defunct, well, you just shut the corporation down and that's it.
They won't come after you with
there were no
guarantee?
personal guarantees in a corporation because it was all done online. You just went in and got it. But if you were a sole proprietor, not incorporated, you got the CEBA loan yourself, you're on the hook for it. So you had to have it repaid by the middle of January 2024. If you didn't, okay, well, we'll stretch it out over 3 years. We'll come up with some kind of arrangement. The CRA has not started aggressively pursuing the people who didn't pay it back yet because it's only been a few months.
So that's why you're
a year. I mean, it's the government. It'll be a year or two before
they'll get their pound of flesh.
They will eventually.
I want to ask you one last question, and I think it's really important that anybody who needs help should be dealing with a licensed insolvency trustee. Correct?
Yes.
You are a licensed insolvency trustee. There's a lot of bad actors out in the marketplace pretending to want to help people, and they just take advantage of vulnerable people. And this is a bone of contention for you.
It's a very big bone of contention. So I call them debt consultants. The government calls them debt advisory people. So what they do is they advertise on, I don't know, Facebook or MySpace or wherever the kids are today, AOL, I don't know where they are. And we can settle your debts for 20 cents on the dollar. And you don't need to go bankrupt. You don't need to talk to a licensed insolvency trustee, because if you call Doug Hoyes, he's going to put you in a bankruptcy and charge you a lot of money. That's a big scam. So come to us instead. So go get a cash advance on your credit card for $3,000 to pay us our initial fee, and then we'll put you on a payment plan for the next 5 years where you're going to give us $100 or $200 a month. And then when we get all your information, we'll set you up with one of our approved trustees, and they will file the proposal. And the reason you want to come to us is we're going to tell the trustee the proposal is going to be $200 a month, because if you go to Doug Hoyes, he's going to tell you it has to be $400 a month. So you're going to save a lot of money by coming through us. That's the basic pitch.
Which is all bullshit.
It is. Because I'm going to do the deal that you can afford, but is also acceptable to the creditors. I'm not going to overcharge you. If I make the proposal cost too much, you're not going to be able to pay it.
Yeah.
So the law says I cannot charge an upfront fee. Can't do it.
I get paid after the
when
fees
it starts. Yeah. When it starts. There's no upfront fees. So you come in, you sit down with me, we go through an actual budget, not a federal government budget, but let's look at the ins and the outs here and see what's going on. Who do you owe money to? Can you pay it off yourself? If you own a house, maybe I can send you to a mortgage guy who can help you refinance and you're good. Maybe you sell the house. But if you've got more debt than you can handle, okay, let's come up with a plan. And I think what I will be doing over the next 2 years, a lot more than I've done in the last 10, is people who want to keep their house. Maybe they've got 30 or 40,000 of equity, not 200,000, because house prices have gone down, but they've got 50 or 60,000 bucks worth of debt. Okay, so let's offer the equity to the creditors, but spread it out over a period of time. Interest free. So, okay, maybe the proposal's $30,000, because that's roughly equal to what they'd get if you went bankrupt. Well, that's $500 a month for 5 years then. So that becomes an affordable solution. Creditors are happy because they're getting their money and you're not going bankrupt, and you get to keep your stuff. So it has to work. I mean, if the payment's going to be $3,000 a month, then you should probably sell your house. But yes, the way you know if you're getting scammed or not is, number one, are you dealing with a licensed insolvency trustee? And there's only about 1,000 of us in Canada. You can go on the Office of the Superintendent's bankruptcy website and actually check. And number two, are they charging you an upfront fee? Because if they are, guaranteed it's a scam.
Well, Doug, I want to thank you for coming out. You're doing yeoman's work. I really love your Debt Free in 30 podcast. You got a new book coming out?
No, but
you're working on something.
Yes. So if you go to our Debt Free in 30 YouTube channel, anytime after May the 8th, and I'm sure people will be watching this for years in the future, we have a full-length documentary.
That's what it was, a documentary.
And I won't say anything more about it other than that, although what we do is we trace the history of debt. And so you can actually see how we got into this situation where we are now. So I think it gives a lot of context to it. People think, oh yeah, loans, that's a new thing. No, it's not a new thing, and it's been around. And the way it's morphed over the years, how, car loans, installment loans, all that thing. I mean, these were things back 50, 60, 70 years ago. So
looking forward
definitely
to
worth
it.
something to check out.
Well, again, thanks again for coming out. I really appreciate it. And we'll have to do this again.
Appreciate it. Anytime, Vince.
Thanks.